I had the pleasure of meeting Anish for the very first time when he joined us on our recent Maldives liverboat trip, him being a diver. And it was great to interact with him and to learn from him. He's a flipping encyclopedia, and you feel really small, like a homeopathic pill when you're talking to him. Okay, so his knowledge is really good, and I was really happy that he accepted our invitation today to join us. A little bit of background on Anish. He's currently the president and CEO of the Wildlife Conservation Trust, a non-profit organization which is working in and around 160 national parks and sanctuaries in 23 states of India. He is a member of several government committees, including the National Tiger Conservation Authority, state boards of wildlife of both Maharashtra and Jammu and Kashmir, executive committee of the Gujarat State Lion Conservation Society, and executive committee of the Village Social Transformation Program of Maharashtra. He has been awarded the prestigious Carl Zeiss Conservation Award in 2008 and the UAA Institute of Chemical Technology Distinguished Alumnus Award. So I think he's got a few credentials, which I think we all can be a bit jealous of. He has co-authored several books. Sorry, he has helped set up Kids for Tigers, a conservation education program that has reached out to 250,000 children every year from 2000 to 2017. He is a large carnivore biologist with immense knowledge on predator-prey relationships and has contributed to several carnivore conservation projects across India. Among the books that he has co-authored, two of his books on national Indian wildlife, and contributed to several other books and publications, including scientific papers. A wildlife photographer of repute, he has photographed some of the most remote wildlife reserves of India. His collection of over 375,000 images serves as a veritable archival record of the wildlife and wilderness of India. He is a part of the organizing committee of the Indian Climate Collaborative and the governing council of the BNHS, which is Bombay Natural History Society. A natural communicator, he is one of India's leading motivational speakers and has introduced thousands of young people to the joys of nature and rationale for national conservation. So I could go on and on, but I think I'll stop here and give you guys the opportunity to throw all kinds of questions at him. And Anish, you can always go on to screen sharing whenever you want. If you can kindly share some wonderful images which I have been privy to on the trip, particularly the tigers and some of the other marine reserve photographs, which are absolutely mind-blowing. Okay.
So thank you, Venkat. Thank you, Karen. And thank you, SSI, for helping this happen. And the happy Environment Day to everybody who's joined. Before I start, some corrections, Venkat. The tiger counts that happen are done by the government. Our organization helps them to estimate tiger densities in central India largely. And that too, I mean, for a few years, we helped the forest department by doing camera trapping. That means counting tigers inside tiger reserves in central India. But because now the capacity of the department has gone up, we have now moved on to do camera trapping outside protected areas, which means we are monitoring all the corridors, largely Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, going towards Chhattisgarh, going towards, Rajasthan. All the forests that are intervening forests between protected areas is what we are doing mostly.
I stand corrected.
It's a Herculean task. 350,000 square kilometers is what is being estimated, or that's the area that the government covers in every 4 years, basically. So anyway, so that part. But I'm really happy that I'm talking to you. As far as today's the way we want to conduct today's session is to have some slides up, not the beautiful slides, but some realities about India and the issues that the planet is facing. However, Venkat and I have discussed in advance that we are not going to have a doomsday discussion here, because hope is all we have and we need to really cling on to it. There are issues, definitely, we can't shy away from them. But I think people who have joined today also would like to know what they can do and what we can do as a species on this planet, so that this planet becomes a better place to live in, not only for us, but all those millions of wild animals and plants that share this planet with us. So just to set the stage for today's question and answer session that we'll have with Venkat, I think I will share my screen, just take you through about 10-15 slides so that we are all on the same page. Venkat, tell me if you are able to see the entire screen.
Yes, we are, Anish. Yeah.
So, certain facts about India. We all know our population is close to 1.4 billion. We have only 4% of the world's renewable water, but we are 18% of the planet when it comes to people. India's forests are worth US $1.7 trillion, which is more than the GDP of Canada. And when we talk of worth, we are only measuring the net present value of natural resources, which means trees, which means things that we can measure. But most of those people who are involved in valuation of natural ecosystems have already mentioned that the tangible part of the value of the forest is only about 6 to 7% of the actual value. So the actual worth of India's forest, what you see here is just 6 to 7% of the actual worth of the forests of India. Nearly, why do we protect tigers? Why do we talk of large species like elephants? Why do we talk of snow leopards? Because they are at the top of the food. Tiger, at least a large carnivores are at the top of the food chain. Elephants roam in larger areas. If you just look at tigers, 600 rivers originate or are fed by tiger-bearing forests. However, there is huge amount of pressure. India has the highest density of livestock. The number of farm animals, and I'm talking about just mammalian farm animals, outnumber human beings. They also outnumber, if you look at the number of farm animals on earth, it is overwhelmingly higher than the number of people on this planet, which is more than 7 billion. Nearly 40% of India's energy needs and over 30% of fodder needs come from the forest. So the picture that you see is inside a tiger reserve of India. So when you talk of a tiger reserve, it is not a place meant just for wildlife. There are, on an average, about 70 to 100,000 people living inside the buffer zones of tiger reserve. This is one of the most popular tiger reserves of central India. It is Pench Tiger Reserve, and you can see the number of cattle that enter the park, enter the reserve pretty much every day. So there's immense pressure on our forests. India is one of the 13 tiger-bearing countries. However, it holds nearly 75% of all tigers, which is quite phenomenal. If you look at just the returns on investment, and you look at the number of the amount of money that is spent by the government to protect India's forests, you can see that it is far, far more beneficial to invest in forests than in destruction of them. So every rupee spent on management of tiger reserves, there are only 51 tiger reserves in India, and the area that comes under those 51 tiger reserves is 2.3% of India. And it's quite surprising. India is about 2.4% of land on earth, and the tiger reserves in India is 2.4% of the land area of India. However, the return in terms of ecosystem services, when I talk of ecosystem services, there are a plethora of them. A few that we know for sure is rain, that is water, oxygen, good quality air, soil, where most of our agriculture happens. Soil, why I say soil, because every time that there is in monsoon, the rivers flow, take away a lot of nutrients along with the water, and rivers originate, as I said, in these forests and mountains, and they take all that water, and the floods that we keep hearing about are actually good for providing nutrients to vast tracts of land. So, soil, temperature regulation, uh, it is also providing seeds. Some of these and most of our grains have actually come from nature. There are many species of rice, many species of millets. There are so many different types of vegetables that still continue to exist in the forests, and scientists are using those to create species in the lab which can feed millions and billions of people. Minor forest produce, which means fruits, which means flowers, which means honey. There are so many different things. Bamboo, this is all available in the forest for people. A huge amount of industry, small scale industry is actually surviving on the forest. So 1 rupee spent on the management gives you a return of about 200 to 530 rupees, which is quite high. It is more than most of our successful businesses. India, as I said, I have already spoken about it, but India is biodiverse. So on the World Environment Day, we must be proud to be able to support such large diversity of wildlife. And by wildlife, I'm not just restricting myself to forests. We are also talking about marine ecosystems. Um, there are about 1,300 species of birds and nearly 25,000 species of flowering plants. We don't know exactly how many species of um animals live under the sea. I was with Venkat and gang in Maldives, and just diving for 6 days, the number of fish that I recorded was more than 220 species, and these dives were not focused on completely on wildlife, because there are people with varying interests. So you can imagine how, and these are just number of species, but I am not even counting the number of individuals per species that I must have recorded. So it's just mind-boggling how much the oceans are supporting. But there is crisis, and we all know about it. In the past 70 years, the world population has tripled, and the demand on water has gone up 6 times. It is very clear from the kind of shortage that you are experiencing. Um, there is water crisis all the time. Either there are floods that now we talk of a cyclone that hit West Bengal, Sundarbans. There was flooding because of high tide, and that flood actually destroyed so many fresh water bodies that the people there are dependent on for drinking, because around Sundarbans everything is salty. So they actually have to create, kind of extract groundwater, and there is some amount of, these are artificially created ponds. All of them have got flooded. Their fields have got flooded with salt water, and you can imagine that the yield in all those fields will go down. 60% of the population size of vertebrates, that is mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, amphibians, all those with vertebra have declined in the last 45 years. 18 of the last 19 years are the warmest in record. This year too, India has clocked, the status of environment of India report was launched yesterday for this year. And this year, that is the last year, 2021, was the hottest year in the last 10 years. And out of the last 10 years, 8 years have been hottest in the history of the country. If business as usual happens, which means we continue to do what we are doing, we are looking at nearly 14 crore, that is 140 million climate migrants. A lot of people from Bangladesh are seeking jobs in India. A lot of people in India are moving to other countries. There are so many countries in Africa in the Middle East, which are going through crisis, and there are mice, even in South America, you must have seen those very, very saddening scenes where people are actually swimming with water bottles on their, stuck to their body so that they can swim across sea to enter America from South America. So this is a refugee situation is largely an offshoot or a fallout of environment degradation. As forest goes down, the poorest of the poor stops having access to food, and therefore they have no option but to move. And that's the reason why most of these refugee situations we are seeing across the planet. There are also, environment issues are flashpoints for violence. You can see it has also increased the kind of unrest that you see in so many nations. Terrorism is also, in a way, related to depletion of natural resources. When people stop having access, some of those people, the softer ones, will move. Some of them get tortured where they are, and some take weapons in their hands. And so we must not look at all these issues in isolation. These are all connected. And so while all these things are happening, are we doing enough? The answer is no. In 2017 alone, 16 million hectares of tree cover was lost in the tropics only. I'm not talking about the temperate regions, just in the tropics. But remember, I'm sure you all remember that in last year and the year before last, there have been huge fires in Australia, in Amazon. And in Australia, of course, it is because of climate change and the lack of humidity, and that's why the fires went out of control. But in Amazon, most of them were man-made fires. Even in India, we have seen on television the gory scenes of large chunks of forest getting burnt. In Uttarakhand, we keep hearing about them every year. In Simlipal, in several forests in India, there were fires. And these fires are largely man-made. Because of climate change, because of the reduction in humidity, the fires are going out of control. But people have been burning the forest and the undergrowth, largely the undergrowth, for many, many decades. This is not a recent phenomenon. That they do because for such large stock of livestock, they need fodder. And by winter end, the fodder is not enough, and they can't really walk with their livestock for kilometers because then it is not healthy for those animals. And so they need fodder around their houses, and that's why they burn the undergrowth. Because of the ash and the dew, the grass sprouts and they have some more fodder for their cattle. And in the past, while they did this, there was enough humidity, the fires would be checked. But now it is going out of control, and that's why you see that the frequency and the intensity of fires have gone up. So this 16 million hectares was 2017. If someone goes and actually calculates the amount of forest that we have lost just in 2018 and 19, I would imagine it will probably be double that. And so while there is crisis, we as humans are not doing enough. So India has its challenges. I have already spoken about this. Very high dependence on fuel wood. Forest degradation is rampant, and there is huge amount of population living inside India's forests. 3 million people inside tiger reserves, 100 million people dependent on these 51 tiger reserves, 300 million people dependent on 5% of protected area, of India, which is the protected area network. There are about 870 protected areas in India, which means national parks, sanctuaries, conservation reserves, community reserves, and that constitutes 5% of India. And 300 million people are dependent in some way or the other for their daily subsistence on this forest. We have the second largest road network, and the government keeps talking about building more roads, more rails, more canal systems, more dams to support these large populations that we have. Most of those are either going to come in the forest because you don't have to fight for, you don't have to acquire land. And so it's easier for the government to open up forest areas rather than buying land from private owners. And that's why most of these new roads are coming either through the forest, are going through the forest or through the corridors. And we are building about 23 kilometers of 6-lane or 4-lane highways per day. And that's going to go up to 44 kilometers per day in the next 2 years. We will overtake America, which is currently the leading road network country. So you can imagine India is, I think, much, much, much smaller than United States of America. And we have a population which is nearly 3 to 4 to 5 times larger than America. So the pressure on the forest is tremendous. Climate change, severe floods, erratic behavior of climate. We are seeing much more severe winters, severe monsoons, severe summers. So the intensity of all our seasons is going up. Instead of rain falling on, so if you have a monsoon, we had a monsoon that spanned across 3 months, 3.5 months. Now, the same amount of rain falls in less than 1.5 months, which means a lot of that water is actually not getting absorbed. It is all going into the sea. And so the impact of severe monsoon is that the carrying capacity, which means the absorption is not enough, and therefore your rivers tend to dry up much faster than they did in the past. And you can imagine what it does to 85% or to 65% of Indians, because 65% of Indians are still dependent on agriculture, and 85% of those people who are agriculturists have subsistence agriculture, which means that they grow to eat from it rather than to sell it in the market. So you can imagine the kind of stress that such large populations, and these are extremely poor people and also people who are constantly in a cycle of debt. So the impact of the vagaries of climate is very severe as you go from rich to poor. So when we sit in our comfort zones, and we probably switch on the AC now all throughout the day, and we feel that we are going to beat the problem. But most of Indians don't have the luxury to run away from the reality. And you can imagine the kind of stress, and because of that, the social unrest that this can cause. So this is a warning actually for people, especially the people who are hoarding wealth, to remember that when the equity rises, so inequity goes up, which means the gap between the rich and poor goes up, people are soon going to take law in their hands. And therefore, it is in the interest of the country, or not just India, but the entire planet, that the inequity is reduced, which means the gap between the rich and poor has to be reduced, which means the livelihoods of the poorest people have to be taken care of. The impact on the forest, and when I talk of forest, it is not just trees. When I say forest or ocean, you should know that I'm talking about those ecosystems along with all the plants and animals that live there. So we need to, therefore, it's important to look at all these issues, because this is connected. When the forest depletes, animals come in contact with people, and there is conflict, there is huge amount of pain on both sides. Many people die because of elephants. Nearly 250 people died because of elephants in Chhattisgarh. Okay, in just 1 year. On the other side, every day leopards die on road accidents. They are being clobbered to death. So as a result, populations of so many large animals is going down in certain parts of India. While India is supporting the best populations of tigers that there are, the best populations of Asian elephants that there are, within India, that population is becoming very, very patchy, which means some of the states are doing exceedingly well. Most other states are losing them. So when you look at numbers, pure numbers don't tell the real story. If you really break it down into states, then actually there are only 7 or 8 states in India that have done credible work in protecting their forests. Most other states, and that means the majority of them, are not doing too well on that front. So with this, I'll stop sharing my screen, and let's go to Venkat now and see if there are some interesting questions to talk about.
Thank you, Anish. That was really enlightening, because I think at least for me, it's a learning process. All as laypersons, all we actually get to see and hear is the news point of view, which may not entirely be correct. And in general, most of the time, it is really not correct. So it's really important to have your input on that. Let me move on to questions. I will start. If other people have questions at the moment, some of them have already sent it in by email as I had requested. But if you have questions, jump in and put it in the chat window and we will address it. First question is, what is the process for NGOs to obtain permissions from forest departments to foster wild injured animals?
So wild injured animals are divided into several categories, which means if you look at the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, then animals and plants are classified into schedules. Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Part 1, Part 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4. So depending on where that animal is, um, certain rules apply. For instance, all Schedule 1 species, all Schedule 2, Part 2 species are top priority and you need special permission. In fact, it will, in very rare occasions, will you get permissions to take care of those species. You have to hand over those species to the forest department. However, um, if you have proven track record that you have managed certain species, then the forest department can on their own, when you go for permissions, ask you to help them in rehabilitating some animals. So that can happen, especially when it comes to birds of prey, like owls, like eagles, because while the forest department deals with wildlife, but some of the best wildlife rescuers are sitting outside, which means they are not part of the forest department. And so at the local level, forest department officers do take their help. And if you have the right facility, which means if you can't rescue a tiger and say, I will take care of the tiger in my flat in Bombay. Um, so you need to have the right space. You need to be able to prove that your success record has been good, but you have to definitely, whenever there is a wild animal that you rescue, be it snake, be it monitor lizard, be it a turtle, you should inform the local forest department straight on. Don't wait for a day or two, because if the information leaks, then you are liable for, they can take action on you. Some of these snakes, like the python, like the boas, which are not very rare, especially if you are from Goa, even in Bombay, those are scheduled animals. So if you are found with a python, you can be put behind bars for 7 years, and you could end up paying a fine of up to 150,000 rupees. Now, why is the forest department being harsh with people who keep wild animals? The answer is that it has been seen in several states that people start rescuing animals. Once they become good at it, they realize that there is not much of checking, and some of those have traded in these animals. So a python or a boa or a monitor lizard can always be sold in the illegal market, and people have done that in the name of rescue. So most of our laws are not meant for, are not written keeping the good guys in mind. They have to be tight. Otherwise, say tomorrow because I am part of a organization which is respected, and because I work on tigers doesn't mean that I can be allowed to have a tiger, because there is still trade in live tigers, which means tiger cubs, even today, are being smuggled out of the country through aeroplanes as well. So it's not just happening through land, but it is also going through flights. It's tiger cub is about 1.5 kg or 2 kgs or 3 kgs when it's tiny. They put it, they can easily get the animal out. So many falcons, so many tortoises, so many turtles, fish. There is huge trade of wild animals today. It is the fourth largest illegal trade on earth after drugs, ammunitions, human trafficking. and therefore the laws have to be stringent. In fact, the Amazon and some parts of Southeast Asia have been ravaged, some parts of those, because of illegal trade in wildlife. Africa especially is very well known for that. And a lot of terrorists and a lot of insurgencies there, insurgents use animals as an in exchange of drugs and ammunition. So there is a direct link between terrorists and poaching and smuggling, and therefore the government has to be careful. So it's good to be in love with wildlife, but we need to know the wildlife laws, and it is definitely important that the forest department is roped in as soon as you rescue a wild animal.
That's disturbing, Anish, to hear about so much of trade going on even now. And I understand that actually it has become worse during the pandemic.
Yeah, pandemic has, it's, I don't think it's, I mean, there is a direct relation between unemployment and more dependence on the forest. So it is a temporary surge. When the cities start functioning and people get opportunities to go back where they were working, I'm sure they'll go there, because nobody wants to be involved in any willingly in something that is considered illegal. So I think there have been issues and there is surge in hunting, but it is not in proportion, definitely, to the number of unemployed youth that we have in the country, which means our culture is still stopping people from pilfering natural wealth, which is quite amazing. A lot of people felt, I also was worried, but at least from my and my organization's experience in Central India, there has been a slight increase in poaching of prey animals, which means deer and all that. However, even outside, because we are doing camera trapping work outside protected areas even right now, and our camera traps are still showing the movement of people. People are always captured on camera, so that has not gone up drastically, and we have still got a lot of prey species on the cameras. Obviously, it is visual right now. We'll need to analyze and see the frequency at which those have happened. So there must definitely be a surge, but I would say our culture is extremely helpful when it comes to protecting nature, and that is why India still, with so many people, is highly biodiverse.
That's good to hear. All right, my own personal experience, Anish, which I just wanted to share, is we had an incident in Siddhartha, Goa, where we were based a long time ago, 95, 96, and we found a bird being attacked by crows. So we went and grabbed it. It was a young Brahminic kite, which had lost one claw, but it had already recovered from that, but it was surviving on one claw. We took it and we put it in the dive center in a basket. And then I called a friend of mine who was then working for WWF in Goa. And he told me they had no facilities for taking care of these animals, and I would need to contact the forestry department. And very honestly, my interaction with forestry department was zero at that time. I was very worried that they would probably put it down or something like that. But I did call them, and to my amazement, within half an hour, three people came down, officials, and we had a lovely interaction with them. They examined the bird on site. They said, we will take it away and we will keep it in Miramar, which was quite close to my office. And then once the animal is stabilized, then we will move it to Bondla, which is a small sanctuary in Goa. And then we will reintroduce it into the wild. And they surely did that. We did follow up. They did give us calls saying that this is the status. And that's how my relationship with the wildlife department here started, which was wonderful. And they're really a dedicated lot of people. I think they're doing a hard job in difficult circumstances, which we must also appreciate.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Is there now a process to protect small fragments of urban biodiversity hotspots in developing cities?
See, there is process, means in terms of law. Again, I'll talk from the policy, because I mean, most people are attached to greens or the green areas around their homes. So every tree is protected. So if you see anybody chopping a tree, you have the right on behalf of the tree to protest or stop that person. So that way, our laws are pretty strict.
Okay.
However, what happens is most of us today are we think that by having a small campaign on social media, we will be able to stop all these things. It doesn't happen. You need to physically be there. And so I have seen in Bombay, where I was growing, was much greener. There were so many wetlands, natural freshwater bodies. However, many of those have been reclaimed. And definitely we are fighting some the lobby which is bent upon developing cities for big money, and so they are powerful people. Often times there are gundas that they can easily hire. So the best way to fight this is that the law will support you, but there has to be people in that vicinity who have to come down, and just not one or two people, but it has to be like a larger group, the entire society. Then the forest department and other departments, and especially media, will get into it, and that's the way to protect it. So policy wise, their policy is there. However, the intention of protecting it is limited. So people want to talk of it and say things like, we don't care about the environment, the government isn't doing much, but it's not like that. There is, if you can write a letter, open letter to the department, to the municipality and the media, and actually go out there in a group, take the photos and keep publishing stories. A lot of people have been able to fight the reclamation that has gone on in several places. I have some examples from Bangalore. There are several examples from Bombay. The most famous one that we all have witnessed recently is the RA colony battle. That it was largely because the citizens of Bombay, and especially I think the people who live in this area, actually got down, and they went hammer and tongs. There were NGOs, there were individuals who were fighting it on the forefront, but there was huge support from the masses, and that's the reason they had to actually, the government will eventually have to spend 200 or 300 more crores in it. And that's when some of the business people felt that 200 crores eventually will have to be taken from the communities, right? Because when a metro or big railway line comes, the money finally comes from the people who use it, which means that through tickets, the tickets may be more expensive. So we talk about expenditure when it comes to traveling by a metro, and we say, let's save 200 crores because we'll have to then charge the people. And India is it's about poor people, so we can't do this. The fact is, by liquidating forests, as I told you during my initial slides, that 1 rupee invested in management of forest is equivalent to nearly 530 rupees of return from it. And so if you look at that, then 200 crores is nothing. And for Bombay, it's a financial capital. And I think if any city can afford to spend extra money, it is Bombay city. So I think the fact that we could fight this battle in the most developed and a monster city, I think it is possible to do in any other place.
So, Anish, on that subject, can I ask you a question? Is there an ethical fund in India in which one can invest in forests? Surely the government can raise a lot of funds for conservation in this manner.
Correct. There is no such fund as such, but some tiger reserves today have foundations now, so people can donate to those foundations, and the money in that foundation, obviously there is a committee, and that committee also has individuals who are from outside the government, and that committee sits and decides how that money is going to be used. So it is watertight. You can't use that money for any non-forestry related work. And so there are these foundations around tiger reserves, but the government really doesn't have ethic fund or something like that. I would say more than that, what you need is for the government to elevate the status of ecosystems, which means today the finance department, that is the center, devolves money to the states based on their forest cover. So this is about 7.5% is allocated to forest cover, which means Kerala state, if it has higher forest cover, if they maintain the forest, then they get the lion's share of the money. Those states that have not done too well on the forest front will get money proportion to how much degradation has happened. So while that is good, and that percentage has actually gone up, it has now become 10%. But what is not right is that they only talk about forests, which means that if I am in Ladakh and if I am living in an area which is beyond the tree line, there are no trees there, which means even if I protect that landscape, that ecosystem, I am not recognized, which means a state like Rajasthan or a state which is drier or a state which doesn't have forests because of the way it is, like Gujarat, some of these areas, they will not be getting that kind of money. And so it is, in a way, there is a perverse incentive for, and those states which are in areas which are green are constantly going to get the benefit. So what we must all strive to do, and therefore today is the World Environment Day, and the theme for this year is ecosystem restoration. When we talk of ecosystem restoration, most people will think of planting trees, because I've already got so many calls saying that, oh, we are having this tree plantation drive. Can you come and, it will be good. The children will want to interact with you. And I said, fantastic, do it in the colony, but that's fine. In the city, you should do plantation. But ecosystem doesn't mean trees alone. It means biodiverse ecosystems, and ecosystems are many types. Just to list down a few so that you understand, the shoreline is an ecosystem. The intertidal zone is a unique ecosystem. The seagrass ecosystem is different from the coral reef ecosystem, from deep sea. So just the sea also has different types. Then you go on land, then grasslands. India has done extremely, I would say we have lost more than lakhs of hectares of grasslands in the last 200 years. So the grassland ecosystem is the most hammered because you don't see trees there. It's very easy to encroach. And people think that we'll protect the forest, but actually grasslands can sequester comparable amounts of carbon as thick forests can. So places in Africa like Serengeti, like Masai Mara, they have a big role to play in sequestering carbon. So that's important. Then salty marshlands. So in Little Run of Kutch, Greater Run of Kutch, these are not wastelands. Mostly, and in fact, the government also talks of these areas as wasteland. And so tomorrow, say, if we talk of solar power, and we obviously everybody agrees that mining for coal is not a great idea because it destroys the mountains, it destroys the forest that is there. Plus, there is runoff which pollutes water. There is underground water that gets impacted. Plus, the carbon dioxide that gets generated by when the electricity is being formed. These are all injurious. The world has understood that. So many banks have stopped funding, or at least pledged to stop funding thermal power plants or phase out the funding in the next 5 to 6 or 7 years, right? So that everybody's agreed. But then people are saying, let's move to solar. Now, solar currently also needs space. So if India needs to generate all its power from solar, they will need huge tracts of land where they can install these solar power plants. And in the head of so many officers within the government, these areas like deserts, grasslands, oh, there are no trees there, so it's open, let's go and cover it up with solar. That is not the way to do it. So there is so much degraded land, there are so many other lands which are available. So we need to map all that out and leave other ecosystems out. Mangroves, again, ecosystem, the trans-Himalayan area, which looks completely barren, the cold desert area of Ladakh, there are higher reaches of, Kashmir. These are as important as the forested ecosystem. So we need to understand that ecosystems means all those areas which may not look like each other. They may look completely different. Just because you don't see an elephant walking or a tiger jumping after on a deer doesn't mean that that area is of no use. In
So
desert,
basically, what you're saying is we need to redefine our concept of ecosystem and incorporate that into the government paperwork
yeah, so
and law.
correct. And see, what this brings me to some important, people like to understand things from examples and numbers. So when I talk of ecosystems again, I'm talking about the species in there. Now, there have been research, and this is many, many years of research on whales. So we all know that whales have been hammered because of illegal hunting. So many countries still kill whales for blubber and for so many things, right? If you look at a large whale, which means humpbacks, blue, sperm, all these whales, each whale is sequestering 33 tons of carbon. People think of sequestration and they say, okay, grow trees and it will take. That's fine. That is what we learned when we were in 4th standard. But we have to understand that every species, so whales, what do the whale do? Why is the whale important? It feeds in deeper oceans and it moves in vertical direction. So whales go down and then come up again. When they do that, they are getting nutrients up. When that nutrient comes up and in shallower waters, phytoplankton needs that nutrient. So phytoplankton grows. Phytoplanktons also sequester huge amount of carbon, right? And so because of that movement, and when whale comes up, whale poop is also very important because that becomes the food for the phytoplankton. So the whale is going down, getting nutrients up, at the same time it is obviously excreting all of it. That is then fed on phytoplankton. Phytoplankton is like the foundation of the ocean. And that, if you look at the value of that and the amount of carbon dioxide that it takes in, we are looking at about 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide or carbon sequestered because of whales alone. And so if the population of whales can come up to what it was, they are actually fighting climate change for you. So it's
It
not
could
just
well be it's our salvation, basically.
yeah, yeah. So simple thing. Now again, I'm talking about say grassland ecosystems. So when I was talking about grasslands, what is in grasslands? You have black bucks, you have several species, you have wolves, you have chinkara, that is Indian gazelle. Think of Africa, you have wildebeest, you have so many species of antelopes, eland, topi, and all these species. In a healthy grassland, the antelopes will keep the quantity of grass in check. In such natural ecosystems, fire frequency is much lower. And so what happens is they are chewing on the grass, it passes through their gut and they're excreting that. That itself, that process is helping to enrich the soil. So it is a closed system, which means the carbon that the grass is taking from the ground and from the air is passing through the animal. Some of it is stored in the animal. And when the animal dies or when it excretes, all of it goes back into the soil and that keeps moving. It's a closed loop, perfect. No energy is lost anywhere. The moment you kill wildlife, which means you go and start hunting animals, or a disease happens, and so like an epidemic, or so there is a pandemic that can actually wipe off herbivores, or there could be hunting. The moment that happens, the grass will grow much more than it ever did. That biomass will eventually, when it catches fire, it really goes and burns large stretches. All of that, the carbon, remember, is going up in the air. So that ecosystem is losing the carbon that it had sequestered. And that goes in the atmosphere. So it creates an imbalance there.
Right.
So that's why when we talk of grassland ecosystem, it's not about grass, it's about an ecosystem which has a wolf, which has a antelope and other species. So these are very interesting facts which people generally think, they think why grassland or why a forest, for instance, elephants. People say, why do we need elephants? And elephants have no role to play in climate change. The fact is, now I am talking from the environment and the climate change perspective. That's why I'm giving you these examples of different ecosystems. We already spoke about the ocean. We talked about the grassland. What does the elephant do? The elephant is actually keeping the undergrowth in check. So if you have a forest which has no elephants, it will be much thicker underground, and the undergrowth is thick. There is tree cover, then there is a shrub cover. The shrub cover is very dense, and because of that, the kind of exchanges that have to happen from the nutrients is lower actually. So when a forest grows more than the natural through natural processes, it actually has lesser amount of carbon, because in such ecosystems where a certain species has been removed, the plants that grow there are not as diverse. They are generally one or two species only. And those, because it becomes like a monoculture, what happens is the sequestration goes down. But when an elephant is introduced in that ecosystem, the elephant will keep the undergrowth in check. Light also penetrates. They disperse seeds. A lot of other things then happen in the soil, and it has been proven that the soil has more carbon at an optimum population of elephant. So from the climate change perspective, these are extremely important things, and studies that have happened over decades have proven these facts. So ecosystems, any forest. So when you talk of tree plantation is perfect in cities because we have really destroyed, and there is, you need to have trees there. So wherever you get an opportunity, you should plant trees. But when you talk of changing the climate scenario as a government program to rebuild forest, then that should happen through natural regeneration, which means you stop the injuries, which means stop cattle from grazing, stop fire from happening, stop people from illegally removing wood. The forest will come back on its own because it will be dispersed. The seeds will be dispersed by the species that are found there, and therefore it will be in the proportion that exists in the forest, and that forest is far, far more important for sequestering carbon than a forest which has one species of trees for thousands of hectares.
So Anish, I think basically we really need to take the bigger picture, the broader picture.
Right.
And every insect, every bird, every animal living in the forest is incredibly important. Right? That is what we must keep in mind. Not just the tiger, not just the elephant or the big five.
Same thing, just one line on insects. There, people have studied that. So if you have an ecosystem where you have predators which are sitting, so you have a grasshopper, but if that ecosystem doesn't have spiders, the soil will have fewer, the capacity to absorb carbon, because the diversity of tree species, because the grasshoppers will go down, will feed on certain specific plants, and they will go because there are no predators for the grasshopper.
Right.
So it has to be a complete ecosystem intact. So that's predator and prey. So there's nothing like good and bad. Why? Oh, the spider is bad because it kills, or the tiger is bad because it kills a deer.
Sure.
Nature only knows balance.
Right. We have a question from Digant Desai. Are states independently responsible for conservation issues, or is there a central government mandate that overrides this?
No. So it is a conservation, wildlife conservation, even the forest, whatever is happening in that field is a concurrent subject, which means both state and center are responsible. States primarily have the responsibility of protecting their forests. Center helps put policies in place so that the states don't do crazy things on their own. So they have to put a guideline. So definitely center is responsible for setting guidelines, but the implementation on the ground and the buck really stops with the state. So the states cannot pass the buck to the center and say, okay, we couldn't do because we didn't get money from the center. Center does put in money, but the salaries of all the forest staff and the day-to-day functioning of that mechanism, that means the forest department, is the responsibility of the state. The center gives non-recurring costs. Okay. But having said that, some of these states are doing good work. In fact, the amount of money coming into states from the center has gone down actually. So we must do much more from the center as well. So in fact, center needs to play a much bigger role than it is playing, but not in regulating things that the state should do, but in terms of funding, in terms of building capacity of the state.
Okay. Now, in a nutshell, what are your challenges that you have faced in all these years that you have been working in conservation? If you can list it out in like points, just broadly telling us, I'm sure there must have been many.
Challenges are there, but people like us who are fighting, not fighting really, we don't look at ourselves as warriors. We are trying to unravel the secrets of nature and explain it in simple, understandable languages to the government, to the business houses, to the common man. Because there is huge amount of knowledge. That knowledge needs to be translated in a language that they understand without diluting it. So simplifying doesn't mean getting to dilute the reality. So that's what we do. Challenges are many. See, the challenge that most conservationists today are facing is that our laws are there, but the committees, the government committees that are formed are not allowed to play the role of, the checks and balances are being diluted. So that is one challenge. Second is obviously the education system is such that children feel that conservation is not a great place to be. The education on school, so there is not enough stress given on environment at the school level. So you don't have the kind of people coming out of it now. There are a lot of interested young people, many more than when I was growing, definitely, but not in proportion to the problems that we are facing. So that means schools are somehow putting blinkers on children so that they don't see the reality and they only focus on careers, which is not the right thing. So that is a challenge.
So we need more education and sensitization.
And children, people say don't share this with children. Children won't be able to take it. Children are the most hardiest of them all. If there is an earthquake and if a house collapses, the child will have a better opportunity to, or probability of surviving that. So children understand, and I feel I talk to children who are 6 years and above like they are adults, and they do fantastic stuff. In fact, they teach you so many things, believing in others, working as a team, having hope. All those things I learned from them. So definitely that. So challenges that our schools are, these schools are factories for creating the workforce. So what do you need in the market? You need computer scientists. Let's create computer scientists. We don't want that. We want children to explore their world and see what they see. You can't hide those things. So that is one. Then funding. A lot of small organizations, and my organization is medium-sized organizations. We have some benefactors, the people who are supporting us. And so it's easier for me to work on the ground. But I know of so many organizations who are smaller in size. They are finding it almost impossible to survive today. And COVID has only made their life more difficult. Remember one thing, that if you have a Ferrari, and there is no harm in having a vehicle that runs fast. Ideally, it should run on solar power so that it doesn't blow up thermal power. But that's fine. But you can't have a Ferrari with an accelerator and not a brake, because then that Ferrari is sure to hit and get demolished. So conservationists, environmentalists, they are not impediments to growth. They are trying to tell you that the forest is going. When a whale goes, you are not going to be able to manufacture a whale. You can manufacture a child to go and become a computer scientist, but you cannot manufacture a whale. You cannot manufacture a tiger. That happens through natural processes, and that takes its own time. So what you lose cannot come back rapidly, which means you need to respect what there is and restore what has gone. Now, because of this, some of the developmental projects are stalled because they are, if you look at cost benefit, they are too costly and they are not benefiting enough. So they are the ones that people like us recommend should not go ahead. And
so I'm going to ask you a question which is directly related to that.
No, but one sec. So the challenge is that for these organizations who are speaking for the larger common good, people are not investing the kind of money they should invest on them. People go for a movie and they can spend 5,000 rupees just for 3 people and then go for lunch. After that, that's fine. But if they have to give some donation to an organization who is fighting for trees and wetlands or something, then say these are noisemakers. I know, jhanda leke khade ho jate hain. That's not what they are doing. You need to. That is a big challenge for small organizations, single man organizations, or organizations with 20, 30 people. So you need to act individual. And India is 1.4 billion people. All you need is each one of us giving 1 rupee, and you have 1.4 billion rupees. So we must open up.
Keep it in perspective. Yeah.
Right. So that, and then finally, I would say, I think in terms of another challenge, I actually feel another challenge is that there are not enough women who are being encouraged to come and join this, because there are, and my team has several of them, and they are no less than men. And so I think somewhere in our
Probably better, because they think from their heart, not from their head.
Correct. So yeah, but I'm not comparing the two. I think there's a continuum between boys and girls. So there is nothing like a man and a woman as separate. It's a continuum. And so I feel that as a society, we need to encourage, because definitely, as you said, women think about the future. Women think from the heart. And today, we have used our brain for the last 250 years, and look where we are. It's time to start thinking from our heart. So I think, so that is also a challenge. And there are, so in fact, I had done a master's in wildlife biology and conservation. And I remember that in the second batch, the batch after mine, there were 15 seats. 9 of them were girls and
brilliant
boys. And they're doing fantastic stuff outside.
Okay, Anish, going on from your point about projects, large projects, small projects, whatever. There's a question from Mandira. So what are your thoughts on the last ancient living ecosystem in the Nicobar Islands at Galathea Bay being changed towards the setting up of the transshipment harbor? So is this a good, obviously a lot of people feel very strongly about this. There are online campaigns right now against this project. What are your views very briefly on this?
There is no doubt that any developmental projects that will hit small islands where which are very fragile, because by being an island, there is no emigration possible, which means fish can obviously move around, but other species cannot. So what goes from an island seldom comes back. So so most of our Nicobar and Andamans, even Lakshadweep, they are very fragile. They may have a lot of animals on it. Doesn't mean that you can, the injury caused on a forest like Kanha will have far smaller ramifications in the future than an injury caused on the island. The island will never be able to come back, because there will be no animals or birds or
migrating there, yeah,
going there, right? So that's one. Galathea per se also has a very, very robust nesting colony of one of the largest turtle on earth, the leatherback turtle. So if things, any harbor or any port that comes will definitely have impact on wildlife. There cannot be a port which is healthy or which has no negative impact. So one has to understand that. And if you are going to have, and the kind of tourism that happens in Maldives, and some of our people here in the policy making games are saying that, we need to create more earning for our people, and therefore we need to go and do high-end tourism. If you go, and I've just come back from Maldives, and I know that the ecosystem is so badly hammered. Terrestrial one is almost finished. What is there is under. And that I'm sure, because I have not been there 30 years ago. And it is probably a shadow of what it is. I definitely enjoyed my time there. But I can tell you from what I was seeing underwater, that the actual ecosystem, the way it must have been 30 years ago, would be very different. So the tourism model of Maldives is definitely not a healthy tourism model. A high-end property in sea, which means you will need a harbor, which means you will need motorboats, which means you will need so many different things there. and that is going to destroy the ecosystem there. There is no doubt about it. So ports, one has to be extremely careful about, and the world has actually was built around ports. So that's why Bombay is so a financial capital, because it was a port. And so along the oceans and the coast, unfortunately, we have done this. And even before I and you came, Venkat, we had already made these ports. But now we have to understand, the science is telling us that no, you can't have these mega ports and then expect wildlife to happen. And then you can't grow corals on walls, cement walls under the sea, and say that this is restoration. That's not restoration.
Correct. Okay, I know that your topic basically said terrestrial, but I think largely on this forum there are a lot of divers present, and of course we are more to do with marine conservation. I will touch briefly on other things which are to do with marine. Now, there's one question from Trisha Ghosh who asks, do you think that citizen science and mitigation by the general public can help create offshore reserves slash marine parks?
I think we should try, Trisha, everything that's possible. And citizen science, we have seen, is powerful, because that is one positive that comes out of the social media. People have access; they are with their phones all the time, and so I think definitely. And we must in India start talking about reserves in the sea, because there is enough pressure being put by NGOs. I'm not saying it's enough on the land, because you can visibly see. The problem with the sea is that when you are in an ocean or sitting on a shore, the ocean will look as beautiful in the evening as it looked 300 years ago. But you will not be able to see the sad reality that happens underneath. On land, when you're sitting in front of a degraded forest, you know, and your heart goes out for it. The ocean is so much more injured, yet we find it very beautiful. So that's the issue. So definitely the focus, and deliberately, we must now start focusing on oceans. And we all know that oceans are providing 50% of all the oxygen that you are breathing comes from the ocean. And so it's not just for other life, it's for you. So
Yes.
if you ignore the ocean, then
at our own peril.
And with COVID, we know what it is for one breath of,
yes,
life
out
goes.
of sight, out of mind. Unfortunately, that is what has happened with the oceans for too long. Okay, how does conservation and development go hand in hand in a post-pandemic world?
Conservation and development, first of all, um, ecology and economy. So ecology is the bedrock for economy. So you cannot have sustainable economy and sustainable growth if you don't have natural resources. So there is no economist today disagrees to this. Okay, and some of the top economists, you should read the Das Gupta report that has come out, very nicely put. Research that and the papers that he has written for last several decades have been compiled as one. It's a slightly dense report if you are a non-economist, but there is a shorter version of it, and I think you must all read that. And so ecology is required for economy. And so there is no option but for development to go hand in hand with conservation.
It's similar to saying that you could have $1 million and you have no oxygen to breathe.
Yeah,
right?
you could have. Yeah, I could spend all my life destroying the planet so that I can earn money. Then by 40, I get some disease, and then I spend that money just in 5 years.
Precisely.
So that has happened. So that is exactly how it is. And so we have to strive, and that even common man can help it. You don't have to be a conservationist for that.
Right.
There are these very, very simple things that we all know. But we can't stop at plastic. We can't stop at walking. Those things are bare minimum that we must anyways do. But there are many more things now, and so citizen science and all that is another thing. But make sure that what youngsters should do, I feel, is, and I think Venkat, it's important because you and I, we are almost around 50s now, 50, 55, and we probably don't have enough time now. But the youngsters who are there, I think they they need to, if they feel for the environment, they don't have to go and be the flag bearer up on the some pristine part of Himalaya. That also needs protection. But what you need to do is start locally, because local issues are not glamorous oftentimes, and therefore we all want to save the rare red panda and some rare bird or some rare species somewhere which is miles away. We must all start local. There are so many issues. And for instance, now I know you are from Goa, and Goa has beautiful forests. I mean, I would love to be living in a state like that. But most forests are going faster than any other place because of the infrastructure and all those things. So people within Goa should definitely stand up for those that are going. It is not just 1 or 10 or 20 meters of forest going for a road. The road is like a injury, that, and it's like a cancer. So once you build a road, lot of things start happening from there. The whole of Amazon has been cut into two because of a huge road that was built
right
for
across
the
that
industry. And that, if you look at those time lapse on just go on online and look for time lapse of forest degradation of Amazon, and you will see that the road came first, and then the entire area around it goes, because people start developing. People start building gas stations, then there will be a restaurant next to it, then there will be a tapri, then they will have a house there, and soon this will all become big.
So you're saying think globally, but act locally.
Yes, that is very, very important, because then you will see success. Otherwise, you will, we'll say I'm like we, we think of Wales. If I start working on Wales, I will never be harsh with myself, because I will always have so many other things to blame on. That I did, but India did, but Finland is hunting, but Japan is doing this. So what can we do? When you work local, then you know that the buck stops at you. And then so if you train yourself there, then you can go and fight bigger battles.
Okay, hold that thought. In your opinion, what are some of the common mistakes made by conservationists in our country, and how can they course correct?
Common mistakes is that conservationists, and I'm not talking about conservationists, even social activists, everybody who is fighting for a cause, because of the emotional attachment to what they do, and because they know that there are, many problems, but they are focusing on this particular one, they become so involved that they don't have a 360-degree vision.
So because it's a horse with blinkers.
Yes. So then what happens is, then they only see what they are doing, and in the process they alienate others. And that is a big mistake, because once you do that, if I have no conversation with people who feel for communities who live in the forest. First of all, I feel conservationists cannot work with tigers. They have to work with communities only. So first, if you feel that by counting tigers, if you feel that by protecting or just making sure that the forest department functions well, you will be able to save the tigers. No, you have to work with the communities, which means conservationists have to understand that while protected area network is extremely important, which means that you need national parks and sanctuaries so that they are safeguarded against problems. Communities and community land has many, many, many more opportunities. In fact, more amount of land is with communities than it is with the government across the planet. Which means if we involve communities in securing their own land, you will be able to bring back the forest or maintain those forests much, much better than just the protected area. Because what happens is, protected area and other areas, if you say, it becomes 1 and 0, where in this one that is protected area, you don't allow anything to happen. People outside feel alienated, and then they say, we will not allow any tree or wildlife there. But if you say that you guys will have a better life, and you prove it to them through livelihood generation, through tourism, through a lot of things, they know that they will be better off if the forests are there. There is hardly any community anywhere on earth who says that I really hate the forest that I'm staying, I want it off. It is not. They have lived there for hundreds of years. So
I think you've answered the next question, which is how can local communities be financially motivated towards conservation?
financially motivate. Again, see, the models that one has to introduce for local communities are not going to be the urban models, because in urban mindset we think of linear growth all the time. In nature there is nothing like linear growth. There is cyclical things, because everything, there is flowering season every year, fruiting season happens. It's not linear. So in businesses, that's the problem, where we'll make money. So if I am selling a product like cotton, I want my sales to go up, but actually that's not how it is. So when you are providing livelihoods, you have to make communities more resilient to changes that are happening, which means that it has to be it's a bouquet of opportunities that you have to get. You can't say that you have a problem because you are an agriculturist, do this and then everything. No, that won't happen, because they are going to get, there will be malaria in these rural areas. That will have impact on them. There could be flood, there could be drought, so many things. So we need to make them resilient. But livelihoods coming from forestry related work are ideal. And therefore, for instance, if say I was saying 85% of Indian farmers are subsistence farmers, which means they have a land which is less than 2 hectares. With such small land, they are normally never making enough money and they are in debt. So if somehow we can work as a cooperative, which means that the community decides, we show them what is possible, let them decide, and if they decide to bring that land together, then that larger parcel of land can then start practicing forestry things. And it could be a hybrid model where some of it is grain, some of it is mushroom, some of it is all that, which is still, and we have this notion again that, agriculture is a tough thing to do. That is what they know well. So if you can build your livelihood programs around their strengths, they will be far more successful. So you can't say, okay, you are doing this, just give your land to me, I will build a hotel and then you will clean the bed sheets there. That is not livelihood model. So what livelihood is also important. So I can answer this question, but it's a no-brainer. But how to do that is important. And Venkat, you have been a dive instructor for so many years. When you go out diving and when you meet people who are from the local community, I'm sure you're far more happier. So if you went to Maldives, and if in Maldives the guy who's teaching you is from Australia or from Bangladesh, then I'm worried, because Maldives has a problem. Employment is a problem, and because it's an island, they can't do so many things that in India can do. And there, if the dive instructors and the people who are diving with you and the cooks are not from there, then there's a problem. So we need to have a circular economy and a closed circuit economy in the villages, so that the cash flow remains within there. Otherwise,
you benefit the local community rather than...
Correct. So if I want to, so you make money and then that money is given to a car manufacturer, because the villager is then going to buy a bigger car. So all the money that you made, like us, they are doing it. So we need to create that economy, which means when you go in a livelihood program, it has to be holistic, which means the entire village should have the answers for the problems within there. So if I have a machine that I'm working on, the repairing should happen from within the village.
Yeah.
So that's the way livelihood should be done, and always the decision should be with the people,
with the local people.
Yeah. Our wisdom, I have doubt with. Otherwise, we wouldn't have messed up the city so much. So
yes,
you can only tell.
So what advice do you offer for individuals who are not directly involved in conservation, but wish to contribute to the cause, taking into account all these restrictions which are posted by the...
First of all, because you love wildlife, wildlife always enjoys more in the forest. So no keeping wild pets.
Very true.
That's the first thing. People think I love wildlife, let me have a turtle in my house, let me have fish. No. There is huge impact of that. So even when you love, you could actually be more injurious to your neighbor who is indifferent towards wildlife. So that's second. Then you need to explore, which means wildlife and conservation work cannot happen out of your room or in your house. You need to be able to be mobile, go out locally also. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to travel again to Jumri Talaya to do something. Then look at local issues, be connected to local bodies, which means there are so many different. So if you just think of Goa, if you think of Bombay, there are people who are working in different fields. Spend some time with them, volunteer for them. That's the best way to learn. You can't say, tell me what to do, You say, let me help you out. And then once you work there, you figure out whether you are cut out for it or not. And if you're not, then move to another thing. But you go there so that you learn, but also give back, which means you pay them in kind and then learn. Don't say, मेरे को बताओ क्या करना है, I will do. ऐसे नहीं होता. So that you do. There are state level movements as well. So in Goa right now, because of linear infrastructure, so you can fight for a wetland next to your house that you can go and educate children and all these things that you can do. At the same time, at the level of Goa, then you have big roads cutting through, stand for it. Also lobby for a larger program online. So there are different ways of dividing. Then be an optimist. You can't just give up all the time and become harsh. I've seen a lot of people who started off with so much energy, and now you meet them, they are always talking about doomsday. Sab gaya, abhi jaane do, kya hota hai?
Negativity.
So that you stay away from it, because I've seen enough of it. It doesn't help anybody. Then measure biodiversity locally. So measure. So when I went to Maldives, I didn't even go with my camera, because I said, I'm going there for the first time. Let me see what there is. Then I will decide if my next trip I want to go there and do some photography. So measure, and the list I made, I have also approximated how many individuals, which species was. So I may have listed 220 species, but a couple of species or 20 species, I only saw one individual. So those kind of things. So when you're out there, species richness, what is there in the water body? What is there in the grassland? What is there on the canopy? What if there is a fig tree? How many birds come there every day? So those kind of things will keep you occupied, and also polish your the quantitative part of your brain, which is important, because numbers are important, because that is what the government understands. Data. There is no doubt that the problems that we are facing is because the data that is available to you is either not accurate or not enough. So just use citizen science to get large data wherever coarse data is okay, or collect data in your local thing. So today you may see, now for instance, if I want to do something in RA, if RA we had done camera trapping, so the WCS does a program here, and there is a biologist who goes and estimates tiger densities in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. So they also put camera traps for leopards there. There are people who go there for morning walks, and they have looked at birds. So because people were going and collecting and data, there was data. And with that data set, we could convince. Without data, when you talk, it is very easy for the detractors to push you away. So collect data is gold. And then respect justice, respect diversity, respect, the rights of people.
So if you want to learn gardening, you have to get your hands dirty.
You have to get dirty. There is no shortcut.
You have to do things practically, not sitting at home and learning it. Okay. One question is, what are the measures taken to solve or conserve more carbon cycle in India? This is from Tanya Abraham.
Tanya, good question. I actually spoke about some examples. So carbon cycle means the species will come. So if you look at oceans, then you need to definitely work on species, which means bring those species back if they've gone, which means remove those issues or remove those pressure points that we have created, so that their species the people have actually should know, we name these oceans. So there is Arabian Sea, we'll say Indian Ocean, then we say Atlantic, Pacific, but it's actually one. So which is a great thing. On land, there are islands, but there are no islands. Oceans are oceans, right? And they are all connected, which means if a species has gone from somewhere, the chances that the species will come back, if it is surviving somewhere else in similar environment, is much better than on land. So oceans can recover, but you need to remove the pressure points. So carbon cycles means you need to have the plants, you need to have the fauna together, and the interlinkages between the fauna and the plants is what is the most important part of carbon cycle. Another thing is taking away, which means your fossil fuel, moving away from fossil fuel, moving away from coal, reducing the use of fuel like petrol, kerosene, all those things. Nobody now doubts that needs to be done. But the alternative to those should not be like the what they're doing in Canada, where they are going and collecting the subsurface. So there is just a lot of tar which is there on the surface, and that is being scraped right now, and that's being converted. So that is also injurious for that ecosystem. Canada may have a population which is just twice that of Bombay, and Canada may be 3 times larger than India, yet that ecosystem is like that. You can't say, oh, this is our open land, wasteland, let's go and collect fuel from there. That's one thing. And carbon cycle is both at the local and at the international level as well, which means the government treaties have to be in place, which means if I want to eat meat and I want to protect my forest, so I will, and my meat that I want to eat needs fodder, and that fodder I don't want to take from my forest because it will destroy my forest. So I will buy that fodder from someone else, and that someone else will destroy the forest to grow that fodder, which means soya and all other things. So at individual level also, the choices we make is important. I keep talking about choices to
So
everybody.
we have to be very careful about our own personal carbon footprint as well.
Correct.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so buy local, eat local, try to live
And
local
see,
as far as possible.
it seems good when you talk about it. It's not easy. Our
It's
systems
not
are
easy.
such that you have to go to a mall, and the mall is the worst place in terms of energy efficiency. So try and move slowly. You don't do it in an activist mode. You do it as a thinking human being. How can you slowly? Don't preach. Just do, and people will follow. If you preach,
A
people will.
conscious self-audit.
Correct. Self-audit you do because nobody else is, because everybody is in the same boat as you are.
That's
So feel guilty for yourself. Don't make feel other guilty.
Correct.
Because that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Okay. How is it possible to construct sustainable development, especially in civil engineering, when we can talk about ecosystems and saving environment? By Utkarsh.
Yeah. So civil engineers have a big role to play. Look at the sand mining. Sand mining today is one hot and the most detrimental, I would call it mafia in the world. As we grow, as we want houses, as we build concrete houses, you need sand. And it is either being trolled from the sea, which means the huge amount of seabed is being destroyed completely, or it is being taken from the river, and that sand is extremely important. So civil engineers have to find ways of replacing sand through some other means. Reducing the demand for sand alone can change things. So if we want to build a skyscraper which is 200 story, then you will need all those things because it has to stand. But we need to change the way West is thinking. We need to work in terms of what our requirements is, and why India is at the helm of doing some great things, because we are still considered as developing, and most of the development that we are wanting for ourselves has not happened right now, which means we have a great opportunity to take an energy efficient route. I'll just give you an example. If you look at big rivers, Ganges, Kosi, all these big rivers, and people keep talking about river courses and rivers changing courses every year. That happens naturally. And some of it is because of the tectonic shifts also, which you and I cannot feel also. But then there is some depression somewhere and the river will go in another direction. But most of the course changes that you see is because of sand mining. They go and remove tons and billions of tons of sand from the banks. And so during monsoon, because there is a depression there, and the river, once the water comes, it will then enter. And some of these houses that are at the bank people don't even know how that has happened. But if you actually look into the remaining 8 months, you will see there will be constant queue of trucks going and removing sand from there. So civil engineers have a big role to play. Your constructions have to be such that you can take help of natural light. You will have to have solar-enabled houses, water harvesting systems in it, and material that is largely local. And therefore, you can't grow vertical. You will have to have shorter, and therefore, there has to be a limit to the height of the building and all those things. But this is the time that we do. Otherwise, I think sand mining, most people don't even know, is going to really destroy this planet because so many rivers are dying because of the nutrients that are going away along with the sand. And that sand, that is very important, Venkat, you will know, because most of these rivers are emptying into the sea.
Yes.
So these nutrients that are there in the sand, and the sand is important. So the fresh water hitting the sea is an extremely important life-giving process. So if you are going to either modify that and not have the silt going into the sea, it is going to reduce the production of the sea. And millions of people are dependent on fish. So it has so many different ramifications, really. It's not a
So
joke.
even civil construction should actually work with nature, as not
Correct.
against.
Yeah, so there is a field called biomimicry. Go and read about biomimicry, how coral reefs are built. Corals don't come out to you and take sand from you. Corals create its own calcium carbonate. And what it is taking it from the water, it is completely recyclable. And
Yes.
all the sand that you see on the shore is also because of marine organisms who have actually precipitated that thing out of the water. So it's a complete, I always think of a closed loop. So as an engineer, think of a closed loop. If everything can be used, recycled, so while building, see, another important thing, Venkat, is that when we do anything, we first do it and then think of what shall we do after the life cycle of that product is done. Which
So you
means
have to think about the cradle to grave approach from the beginning.
yeah, so it should be cradle to cradle, not cradle to grave. It should be
Okay. Yeah.
that. So if I'm constructing something, I should know that 30 years from now, I'll have to demolish this. So what will happen when I demolish this? Will this add to the burden on the planet or not? If the answer is it will, then you need
don't
to
do
change
it.
the material you use today. So I cannot have a plastic chair and then say, Ari, now what do I do about plastic? Because plastic always remains in the sea. So let me then make a mat out of plastic chair. That is the second best option. Is there an option to not have a plastic chair? That is what you must think. And there is answer in nature. Everything that we do has been inspired by nature. We have modified it so that we use it for our ulterior motives. But nature is the biggest teacher. So biomimicry for everybody, not only engineers, but anybody who lives on this planet should try and see what biomimicry is about. It's fascinating how animals are utilizing nature and giving back to it. Once they die, it's all going back. And
In fact,
again, one thing that I should tell you. So whales, when I say, how do they sequester 33 tons of carbon, is because the whale grows to that size. It has taken carbon. There is carbon in the bones, and eventually, so they feed, and then what I have spoken. But once they die, they sink to the bottom of the ocean, and so that carbon is locked down there. So they have removed that carbon, but it's not releasing back. It is actually going back and going to the depths of the ocean, and it just stays there. And that is what it is. So when you trawl and you go deeper and you go and disturb the ocean from the bottom, you are going to release the amount of carbon, which is many times more than what we are doing on land.
So this is a very real scenario now in today's world, given the fact that we are looking at deep sea mining,
Yeah,
into which India is also now planning to enter in a very big way.
yeah.
So which is a wrong move, basically.
There are wrong moves, but we look for the easiest alternative today and for a lesser evil. What we have to actually hold ourselves to is to actually have no evil, which means that we need to look at processes which are absolutely nature friendly. We should not settle down for second best and third best, really, or the best amongst the worst.
Correct. And I think India is in a good place, being a developing country, because we should now be able to learn from all the mistakes that have been done by the developed
Right.
countries
Right.
already, so-called developed countries, and not make the same mistakes again.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it would be a disaster.
and not hide behind our population and poverty all the time.
No, no, no.
You say, oh, we are so poor, we have to do this, otherwise, no, that's not.
Yeah.
They didn't even know. They destroyed their ecosystems 200 years ago.
Yes.
So
Correct.
Europe, you only have 1% of Europe under the protected area network. India already has 5% and nearly 22% of forest cover. So with 1%, and then people say, how come Europe is prosperous? They are, because they are doing all their products come from other countries. So they don't have enough, but they can have the buying power. And so they are themselves not destroying anything. Yet they are catalyzing destruction in other nations. So everything, so this planet is a closed loop, my friend. And so while I'm talking about these loops, because it's the one, any impact you have or any lifestyle that we have is going to impact other countries. And
So the
so,
price is really not, it's only a notional price. It is not
right.
the actual price which has been paid for a product
No,
to be manufactured.
no.
Yeah.
So all these products which are important and life giving are underpriced today. Starting from water, oxygen. We don't
Yes.
pay for oxygen, and therefore we don't care for the forest or the sea. If you started paying for oxygen, the real price, which means the price of your life, how much you want to pay to stay alive? If I ask you, you'll say, "I'll pay everything." So that is the price of oxygen. Are we willing to pay that? Then, so we underprice everything, and then we give subsidies on it, and so you have a disaster happening because you are underpricing the resource, which means therefore you don't care about the ocean from where oxygen, and you don't care about the forest. That's where
Yes.
it is.
Yeah. So Utkarsh has come back with an observation saying that there are lots of innovative materials in civil engineering like self-healing concrete, wood bricks, wool bricks, AAC blocks, etc. Now, I would request all of you, whoever knows of any alternate products, please either send me an email with links, or if you get in touch with me and if you would like to volunteer for us on our WhatsApp group, we have created several volunteer groups where we would request you to add all this to our database in an Excel sheet, and that would help everybody to make decisions and make informed choices about what is available out there, because there may be many products which people know about but the others don't. And if you're building your own house, for example, at least you'll have a choice of all the things which are eco-friendly or environmentally friendly which you could possibly use. We have already started that database largely for consumer products. I'm not saying that we have tested and tried all these products, but that would also be, the onus would be on you to actually test and use whatever is actually genuinely environmentally friendly. We can all contribute to this, and it's a database which is forever in work in production, work in process. So please do add to this so that everybody can benefit from it. That would be a wonderful addition if you can all contribute to this. I think we have run out of time and also questions. Anish, very quickly, if you can tell me where your journey has taken you and what you expect to achieve more in the future, and how, of course, you've already talked to us about how we can individually make changes. So, what is if there's one thing that you would like to concentrate on now at this stage in your life in making a difference in your own way, what would be that? Please share that with us.
Wow, it's a not
It's
an
a loaded question, I know.
yeah, it's a loaded question. And if I have to talk in short, I think as an organization, we are doing what each one of us wants to do to save the planet. Uh, we are doing a bit, so we are not expecting miracles out of what we're doing. But as if you just ask me, what I want to do is I want to try and influence more and more people, especially the young people, and give them the tools and allow them to construct uh, their future using that tool rather than giving them some ready-made package. So I would like to invest a lot of time in um, trying to influence in whatever way, through examples, through direct action, through writing, through talking like this. So I've been giving webinars left, right, and center, because I think even if one person goes back with a changed or a modified mindset, my job is done. So I think that I will do. And no matter what I do, I will, when eventually my time comes and I'm about to leave, I will still at that point feel like I haven't scratched the surface. So
Very
that
true. I think we are very much on the same page, because that is the whole idea of coastal impact as well, to improve and spread the message and the knowledge and get people to think for themselves and do something by themselves, which will add to the huge pool of people which are already out there as educationists or as NGOs or doing things in their own way. So thank you, Anish. Thank you for a fantastic conversation and talk and spreading the awareness. And the rest, guys, you can only, I mean, we are not going to start thanking Anish individually or on the chat box. I think people like Anish, we need to do and show them and carry on in the same vein as to what he's been doing, which is the best thanks that you can possibly give him. Thank you very much for your time and energy. And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll call off the thing now. There will be a recorded version on. We will post a link at a later date. And people who have missed out or who wish to tell other people to see this, I'm sure everybody will benefit from that. So we'll put it on YouTube and
Is
everybody
there,
can watch.
sorry to interrupt, is there some way that we could keep putting questions to the participants like Anish in the future? And would they be able to, answer those?
Yes, Digant, I think you should write to Venkat, or you can write to me as well. My email address is anish.andheria@gmail.com. Yeah, in fact, you can even write to Social Impact and they will definitely direct your questions to me.
Thanks. Thank you.
Our email address is coastalimpactindia@gmail.com. So anybody who is interested, you can definitely write to us. We will either get the answers from Anish or a huge bank of people who are already on the WhatsApp group, which includes a lot of marine biologists, scientists, laypersons like you and me. All of us are happy to contribute in whichever way we can to help you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, Venkat.
All right. All right, guys.
Bye, Karen.
Thanks, everybody, again. And of course, special thanks to Karen and Siddharth for getting this organized and getting it together. And hopefully we'll look forward to our next meeting, which will be next Saturday at 7:30 in the evening to talk about conservation of whales or whale sharks, which should be very interesting as well. Thank you, guys. Look forward to your joining us.
Bye.